Hello everyone, dear friends. There's so much built around the characters in today's anime that it's easier to say what won't be here. And there will be, mind you, not a lot of interesting things. From the number of characters to the funny situations. And I'm talking about a piece called the site's Jack of all trades in another world. But before the handyman appears in the world of magic, I want to ask you to do me two favors. First, I want you to like the video. The second is to subscribe to the channel. Get ready and let's roll. Golden hands allow people to open the locks to many things. I would say if reality were not so cruel. Unfortunately, very often talented people with skills in different areas are considered as a cheap labor. But because of the handyman, a lot of people get help, such as a squad of adventurers in another world. The guys in the team, consisting of fairy healer Lathan Pan, swordsman Railza, and her adoptive old man father with dementia Morlock, but our main character of the site from another world, where he was just a master at various affairs. So here, where people often don't have more than one or two talents, the site is valued as an extremely skilled person. GG and will open chests, fix tools, cook food, and help with wounds. In general, a super promising man who at this moment fell into a dungeon underground trap. Fortunately, living in a fantasy world, even mortal wounds do not mean the end. Far from it, almost everything can be healed and resurrected, however. The site is now worried about something else. His thoughts are completely filled with past memories of his employer's disrespectful treatment of his person. In the world of men, the protagonist was literally wiped out, and he fears that his fate will be repeated here. But the miraculous squad site has become the opposite of all the ugly people on Earth, and in the company of the adventurers of the site is considered as a full member of the team. For him will naturally worry and try to protect. Plus, one girl in the group has already begun to breathe unequivocally to the guy. Behind the rails at times can be traced a small bond of sympathy for G, so there is every chance for their future rapprochement. In the meantime, let's take a moment away from the history of the site and look at the world where henceforth inhabits. The current land is standard fantasy. It's all about the history of heroes and demons. But in this particular era, there's no human-demon warfare. It's all because of the agreement between the king of humans and the former overlord of the demon army. They had a kind of friendship. Therefore, no one resumes the bloody war. And all the people who are afraid of a new demonic onslaught, constantly reassured by the re-election of random fake heroes, so that people do not panic. In general, the real threat to the living can only pose dungeons, which love to go down different adventurers, or in the extreme case of contract killers. The mediator, by the way, is especially dangerous. Nevertheless, even in dungeons, prepared adventurers are able to get into trouble, and most of this happens because of the traps. There are a lot of them in the dungeons, and if a group is some kind of trap, and you can divide into two parts, as the sign of the next height, you can find yourself in a very difficult situation. And standing hand in hand, the unremarkable protagonist along with the warrior Railza were left alone in the battle against the steel golem. While the elderly fairy wizard was resting somewhere upstairs, and if bad luck and not a heroic act of the site, it's scary to imagine what a nightmare the golem would have done to the boys. But like I said, death isn't the end of the game. Death is not the end game here. And hooray for Elsa was the resurrecting ace up his sleeve, saving the handyman's life with a kiss. A way to embarrass the girl, of course, but still for the sake of the site. She's willing to do a lot, and feelings sometimes can't be commanded. As a spell, then all is lost. Fortunately, the heroes of the situation is kept under control, in contrast to the story of one hidden assassin. There are such ninjas, which can compete with a considerable number of opponents. Although with rare exceptions, as happened with a shadowy villain named Kisurugi, the path of bloody orders comes to an abrupt halt when he meets the love of his life, a witch named Blavella, who sends the boy to the demonic world, from which, against his fate, he makes it back to the surface and with his monster friends tries to get close to the beautiful witch again. Meanwhile, back to the adventures of the site. He got sick, by the way. Because of that, his squad, always relying on his various skills, had a hard time. Fortunately, the next campaign was already in full composition, and after visiting a couple of hours, it would seem past Tunge, the guys in particular, saw in the distance objects of his world. A vacuum cleaner robot that led the team to a hidden passage into an unexplored part of the dungeon. No doubt this was global news, forcing most of the adventurers to congregate at the dungeon, which was aptly named after the site that opened it. Birds of all sorts flocked to the site. Ordinary heroes, the poor, the rich, representatives of royalty were not left out either. And for all, the goal is the same: to find delicious and expensive treasures before anyone else. In general, an unlimited number of people can enter the dungeon, so the competition is expected to be terrifying. For some, chess adventurers are ready to kill each other, and for some, good friendship. The main thing that everyone will be on the plus side. And if decide to treat everything with a positive attitude, then sooner or later the reward itself will come in hand. And so it happened with the friends of Mike, because they found a secret room with treasures before the others. In the room were countless amounts of artifacts, mostly from another world, which came from the site. True, they could not get a closer look at them, because the squad was attacked from behind by the very same Kisurugi ninja in love. Why the attack took place in this particular location is explained in his horrific backstory. It turns out that when he returned to the witch with a prepared marriage proposal, he found a barely breathing body in the basement. As the guide is told by the black-winged fairy primate looking after the girl, the witch is now dying from the removal of the curse of youth. According to legend, when Lavelle feels love in her heart, her immortality will be dispelled and then her end will come. And since she met Kisurugi, one can logically conclude that the love between the two was mutual. But now what's the point? If her soulmate is about to die. However, do not worry prematurely, because the fairy has one option of salvation. For him, just Kisurugi needed to look into the dungeon side. After all, in this place, according to the story of the primate, should dwell the ruler of time, able to turn back time for the witch. And for her sake, the ninja is willing to kill anyone in the way, not even sacrificing his own body, to be sure with the creature summoned from the primate to win. Though, despite the obviously creepy creation before the site, thanks to his ability to be friendly with everyone he has managed to cross paths with, he somehow managed to get into his soul as a great and loyal person. And now he's up against a united abomination along with everyone else, and the main weapon against it will be Grandpa Morlock. And his level above the 18th will allow him to create a spell, which he secretly read out in the wizard's book. A time-stopping spell. If you remind your grandfather how to pronounce it correctly, they'll have 100 seconds free to attack the monster's eyes. But to muster the strength for such a powerful spell, Morlock would need all of his concentration, which at the moment goes into bits and pieces of his memories. It was as if something was flickering in grandfather's mind, and that something was moments of his life when, 20 years ago, he was living with his wife and his own daughter, when the Morlock was on the verge of receiving the great title of all-knowing wizard. Those days were a challenge for the old man. He spent all of himself for the sake of work and almost forgot about his family, with the consequence that karma punished him by the loss of his daughter from a minor illness. And if the Morlock had been at home, he could surely have saved her, but work was more important to him. Then, it was all a blur. His wife left her husband. The poor old man set out to find a way to save the child. And after many wanderings, his wanderings led the man to a mysterious figure. And that's what the old man mistook for the person who could help him save his daughter. However, instead of returning, the personality only destroyed the father's entire memory of his tragedy, and made the Morlock forget almost every memory associated with his former family. And while he was halfway through the battle reciting the time-stopping spell, some of those moments came back to Grandpa, gathering his shattered thoughts from his dementia back into one and allowing the Morlock to complete the spell. The report from that second begins, a minute should be enough time to completely destroy the enemy. But the Morlock did not cease their existence. Something human stopped him, the thoughts of those he must kill. As he touched the beast, he saw the pain that accompanies the Kisurugi, how desperately he wants the dear girl back. So instead of killing, the Morlock only divides the body of his opponent. Not without damage to himself, of course. All these minor wounds, however, do not pose much of a problem. On the contrary, the Morlock showed his wisdom and humanity with this gesture. And as a reward, the young rescued are allowed to leave the dungeon in peace, without any additional rewards. But they will not be left empty either. After telling the story of the Kisurugi, a sudden royal delegation assured the assassin that they had a man with the power to bring his beloved witch back to young life. The king himself, with a sword that demands blood, deigned to come to the repentant ninja and perform a life energy exchange ceremony, taking some from the guy. The cost, disastrous though it was, the ritual worked. The witch's term returned to adequate, and her lover is alive, though not in perfect condition. Nevertheless, the guys don't dare embrace each other right away. First, they need to reacquaint themselves, since the girl was asleep for a long time and her consciousness is still cloudy. By the way, the beginning of the relationship was laid by another couple. The site, after finishing trashing the dungeon with his friends, pulled out besides all sorts of items, additional interesting information about getting into this world. Turns out that a Morlock, trying to find a spell to bring back a loved one, might have accidentally transported the sight a second before the guy's death from his native reality. Now it begs the question, could the grandfather bring the guy back? What if the sight could still see the family? The answer to this question is yes, but if you bring him back, he'll show up in the same place he was taken from, and it doesn't turn out to be entirely beneficial. Going back to the truck and getting him wouldn't be a good idea. Besides, he was already surrounded by care here. And the one that stood out was Rosa, who spoke directly about the need for the sight in her life. And it's great that the guys are making bolder and bolder steps in their relationship. At any rate, the seed is planted, and then Mother Nature herself will do her part. No one is immune from love. It happens in the world of animals, and not only terrestrial, but also demonic. And if a male infernal hound, a servant of the demonic general, looks like a terrible creature, in fact, his heart can be melted by an ordinary-looking white she-wolf. However, the story of these two in the present moments is not so important, because on the surface, there is a much more curious event. Here on a seemingly ordinary day, Grandpa Morlock decides to died out of the blue, although it seems to be a powerful grandfather with boundless magic. Now we have to try to resurrect him. The task is not an easy one, at least it should have been. Until the body of our grandfather's skeleton appeared on the horizon, next to his own grave. Morlock is so strongly composed of magical energy that death itself loses out to regeneration of the old man. And here again a digression to the story of the Hellhound. He, unfortunately, has his whole life crumbling under his paws. The world of demons is a cruel one. There is no place for love there, and naturally, it wasn't possible to wander long with a wolfhound without clashes with other demons. In addition, in one of the battles the she-wolf was mortally wounded, and the black dog was left alone with a puppy that miraculously survived under the protection of his mother. Within that and managed to escape from the demonic realm to the safe relative place in the fantasy world of people, where the protagonist with the girls. To stop seeing the ugly transformation from time to time, the team nevertheless decided to heal the Morlock. And to do so, they must find the last of the old man's energy, stored at the tip of a random civilian in one of the large dogs spotted around town. But before the search, the Morlock gets a philosophical breakdown on life and death. The old man, purposely tucked away in the shadows alone with the sight, wanted to talk about his possible imminent departure from his mortal body. His term is not eternal, and the only thing he wants to see in the near future is the wedding of his adopted daughter Railsa to the sight. The old man's eye is a diamond, though a blind man would rather not see the girl's kindness to the sight. Marriage itself begs to be married, and Morlock would be delighted with the union of the swordswoman. However, in that phase, when from the joy of agreeing on a wedding plan, the lost men were about to embrace each other, to shatter their happiness flew in a dog, guilty of stealing the last part of the Morlock's energy. Here, as a result, the infernal hound in disguise of an ordinary dog, and made enemies of the adventurous face. Both demons and humans pose a threat to him. But the situation only really began to deteriorate when Railsa, running to the rescue, defeated the hound in a duel. Behind the dog opened a portal to humanity and from other demons. A special visit from the general pleased him as well. The level of this pack is not insignificant. You can't handle it like a dog, at least not without your grandfather, who in turn, thanks to the sight, was able to lie close to the energy that took in with the dog and regain lost power. So recovering immediately, Grandpa Morlock, sublimely entering the battlefield, heroically rescued his daughter and almost son from the demonic general's attack, and stood with him in a one-on-one battle. And all would have been well, except for a sudden change in the Morlock's appearance. He grew ponytails and ears from the energy he'd sucked out of the hound, and grew about 40 years younger. His powers had grown disproportionately large as a result, so there was no chance of a fair victory for the demon. As befits an inferior living creature, it was eventually incinerated by the fire of an elderly man who had nearly regained his former form. By the way, in addition to the long-awaited victory, the Morlock informed the children that he was not going to leave the dog that had taken his energy to die. He, as in the case of the Kisurugi, has seen the backstory of the Hellhound, and if the father of the family dies, and the pup will not cope with his loss, and the grandfather cannot live in peace, aware of their tragic fate. And to summarize, the Morlock, bringing down the dog from the other side of the world to the child, also returned to the side group. The protagonist and his friends had just taken a break from their adventures and found time to rest. It would not hurt to send the old man for a checkup, and after such active battles, as was the case recently, and the site with Y had a great weekend. Even had time to build a gift, a bath for the girl built from an unsightly Morlock artifact. In addition, accidentally increased Liffen hand to human size. To be honest, it's no surprise that it was Grandpa's thing that did this to the fairy. Murloc has a bunch of magical trinkets and goodness. There were no negative effects of the Laugh-In Pan to her brief change. Everything soon returned to normal. The fairy was back to her old self and her grandfather's back healed. Railsat is as jealous as ever of people's many looks, and the main character has already entered the fantasy world with his head, where his handyman skills are valued in society and revered by his friends. The end of the first season, and a few words to conclude. The anime-side handyman in another world. This story is not only about a handyman. Over the course of 12 episodes, the anime revealed to us a lot of great characters. A dementia grandfather, a killer in love, a hellhound, and his heavy burden of being a single father. All in all, it's one-word variety. It's just impossible to get bored in Anon. After all, everyone tries to sink into the soul and the characters end up having a royal battle for the viewer's attention. That positively adds up to an in-depth viewing experience. Thanks for watching, bye-bye.